No one knew how long the German Shepherd had been trapped inside the crumbling wall. But when a curious baby crawled over the rubble and laid his tiny hand on the dog's muzzle, everything changed. What happened next brought an entire neighborhood to tears and became a story no one would ever forget. The old cement wall had been there longer than anyone in the neighborhood could remember. Cracked and leaning, it bordered an abandoned lot choked with weeds and rusted cans. Parents warned their children to stay away, saying the wall could crumble without warning. But that afternoon, Clara had been desperate for fresh air. She sat, her toddler, Noah, down in the grass while she checked her phone, just for a moment. When she looked up, he was already toddling across the yard, his little hands outstretched as if reaching for something she couldn't see. "Noah," she called, hurrying after him. "Come back here." He stopped right in front of the wall, his round face turned toward a jagged hole near the base, and he tilted his head, listening. Clara reached him just as a low, broken whimper drifted out from the cracks. She froze, her heart leaping into her throat. Another whimper came, weak, desperate. She knelt and peered into the darkness. For a moment, she saw nothing. Then two dull eyes flickered open, reflecting the afternoon light. A German Shepherd lay wedged between broken beams and crumbling cement, ribs heaving with each shallow breath. "Oh God," she whispered, pressing a hand to her mouth. Noah didn't flinch. He dropped onto his knees, crawling closer until his tiny palm rested against the dog's nose. And for a moment, the shepherd stopped trembling, just long enough to look into the baby's wide blue eyes, as if recognizing something he'd been searching for all along. Clara's pulse raced as she pulled Noah gently back, though he tried to wiggle free and return to the shepherd. "Stay with me, sweetheart," she whispered, brushing a leaf from his hair. She leaned closer to the hole, her voice shaking. "Hey there, can you hear me?" The dog shifted ever so slightly, a rasping breath escaping his cracked lips. His coat was matted with dust and dried blood, and a thick chain hung from his collar, disappearing into the rubble behind him. Clara swallowed hard. Whoever had left him here hadn't meant for him to be found. "Noah," she said, glancing at her. "Son, it's okay. We're going to help him." But Noah didn't seem frightened. His big eyes stayed fixed on the shepherd, and he reached out again, resting his chubby hand on the dog's paw. A shiver passed through the shepherd's body, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he let out a thin, quivering sigh and closed his eyes, as if Noah's tiny touch was the first kindness he'd felt in a very long time. Clara felt her throat tighten. She fumbled for her phone and dialed 911, her hands slick with sweat. "There's a dog," she told the dispatcher, her voice breaking. "He's trapped in the wall. He's barely alive." Even as she spoke, Noah began to hum softly, an off-key lullaby he'd learned from his grandmother. And to Clara's astonishment, the shepherd's breathing steadied, his ribs rising and falling in time with the little boy's song. Clara ended the call and pressed her trembling hand to the cracked concrete. "Hang on," she whispered, voice thick with tears. "Help is coming." But the shepherd didn't open his eyes again. His breathing was shallow, each exhale weaker than the last. "Noah, come sit by me," she urged, but Noah crawled forward again, settling into the dirt right beside the hole. He didn't seem afraid of the dust or the smell or the way the dogs side hitched with every labored breath. Instead, he laid his palm flat against the shepherd's paw, as if anchoring him to the world. Clara glanced over her shoulder and saw Mr. Jensen, their elderly neighbor, walking past the fence. She stood and waved both arms frantically. "Please, over here." Within minutes, half a dozen neighbors gathered. Some gasped when they saw the dog wedged in the wall. Others covered their mouths in horror. "Oh my Lord," Mrs. Briggs whispered. "How long has he been in there?" "I don't know," Clara said. "But he's not going to make it if we don't get him out." Mr. Jensen pulled out his phone to call animal rescue. Another man jogged back to his truck for a crowbar. Through it all, Noah didn't move. His little shoulders rose and fell as he kept humming the same wobbly lullaby, his thumb stroking the dog's dusty fur. When the shepherd's breathing stuttered, Clara reached through the hole and touched his cheek. "Stay with us," she pleaded, her eyes blurring with tears, and somehow, impossibly, the dog stirred. One ear twitched toward Noah's voice. It was as if, in that moment, the baby's quiet song was the only thing strong enough to tether him. To Hope, the rescue truck arrived in a flurry of dust and urgent voices. Two animal control officers jumped out, carrying equipment and heavy gloves. They paused when they saw Noah sitting so calmly, his small hand still resting on the shepherd's paw. "Ma'am," one officer said gently, "we're going to need to move him back." Clara crouched and tried to pick Noah up, but he clung to the edge of the broken wall, his eyes wide and brimming with tears. "No," he whimpered, shaking his head. "Doggy, stay." The officer knelt beside him, his face softening. "I know. You're helping him," he said. "But if you let us get closer, we can save him faster." Noah looked at the shepherd, then back at the officer. After a long moment, he nodded and crawled into Clara's arms, burying his face in her shoulder. With slow, deliberate care, the officers started chiseling away the jagged cement. Every strike of the hammer sent vibrations through the wall, and each time, the dog flinched and let out a faint, pained whine. "It's okay," Clara whispered, even though her voice wobbled. "You're almost free." Minutes stretched into an hour. The sun dipped lower, turning the lot gold and shadowed. Neighbors watched in hushed silence. Just as one officer pried a large chunk free, the shepherd's head drooped, his breathing turning ragged. "No," Clara cried. She pressed her hand to the dog's cheek. "Stay awake, please." But nothing roused him. Not until Noah lifted his tear-stained face and let out a high, bright giggle, as if trying to wake his friend from a bad dream. The shepherd's eyes fluttered open. He saw Noah, and for the first time all day, he wagged the very tip of his tail. That single, tiny movement was all the rescuers needed to keep going. Bit by bit, the officers chipped away the last of the wall. The neighbors moved closer, holding blankets and bottles of water. Even the toughest among them wiped their eyes when they saw the shepherd's ribs heaving with exhaustion. "It's okay, boy," one rescuer murmured, voice thick. "Just a little longer." Finally, with a final crack of the chisel, the last wedge of concrete tumbled free. Dust billowed into the air, and for one terrifying second, the shepherd didn't move at all. Then he let out a trembling sigh and lifted his head, just enough to look for the small boy who had never left him. Noah squirmed out of Clara's arms. Before she could stop him, he toddled straight to the stretcher as the rescuers eased the dog's limp body onto the padded surface. The shepherd's eyes flickered open, and Noah pressed his chubby hand to the dog's cheek. "Doggy, good boy," he whispered, his voice quivering. Someone in the crowd began to cry openly. Clara knelt beside her son, brushing tears from her own face. "You did it," she said softly, kissing the top of Noah's head. "You helped save him." The vet stepped forward, checking the dog's heartbeat. "He's critical, but he's fighting," she said. "We need to get him to the clinic right now." Neighbors stepped aside as the stretcher was carried toward the rescue truck. Noah reached out, his tiny fingers catching in the shepherd's fur. The dog gave a weak wag of his tail, as if to say thank you as the doors closed. Everyone stood in stunned silence. In that moment, it didn't matter who you were or where you came from. They had all witnessed something rare and beautiful. A child's simple kindness strong enough to save a life. 3 weeks later, a small celebration filled the clinic lobby. The German shepherd, now named Valor, walked out on shaky legs, a bright red bandage wrapped around his side. Noah clapped his hands and toddled forward. Valor lowered his big head and pressed his nose into the toddler's chest, as if greeting an old friend. Clara smiled through tears as she signed the adoption papers.